Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope you're having a good day today so far and having a good week. So I told y'all that if I ever could find time to do an extra episode during the week, that I would do that. It's been kind of slow at work this past week, so I decided to take the day off today because it was too slow yesterday, so there was no sense in me going in for a couple hours. So I decided to take the day off, which is nice. And I was looking up some information for a video that I wanted to talk about. And I was going to do that on Monday, but now that I have the time to do it, I'm doing it today. And it's something that I think is very interesting, and I just learned a little bit about it. But I found a bunch of stuff on it to kind of explain what it is, and not just... this is by people, doctors, psychologists, and things like that. So it's not just regular run-of-the-mill people talking about it, although there is. But I do have information from, professionals. So that's why I decided to do this video today. And also, I was going to do a different video today, but I didn't have time to get it all together. I realized I'm going to need more time to take notes and do some research on it. So next week I am going to do it. I don't know if it'll have to go into 2 parts. I may be able to get it all in one. We'll just have to see. But I'm working on a video that's going to talk about the founding of the U.S. and how that ties in with biblical principles and Christianity. And the place that I'm getting the information from, this is what they do. They have a museum in Branson, Missouri, and they go around and they do talks at schools, public and private, and rallies and things like that. And so it's really good information. And so far, what I'm getting, it's very entertaining, and it's very informative. And I like learning things like that. Although I already know it, it's just sometimes when they teach it to you, maybe they introduce something that you didn't think of before, or they put it in a way that you're like, wow, that sounds really good. So hopefully that will work out, and y'all will be interested in that one. Before I start the video today, well, first we're going to read our daily promise. So let's read that real quick. It says, "He will fulfill the desire of them that fear him. He also will hear their cry and will save them." Psalm 145:19. "Fear the Lord and seek him on his heavenly throne, and you will be given the desires of your heart." So fervent is the believer's desire to see God and please him, that God is well pleased to fulfill this desire. These that seek God shall see him. There is no reason that man in his shabby and sinful existence has any right to expect God to reveal himself, yet God has given his children surpassing desire to see him, and he in mercy will show himself to his children. Okay, so before I start off with what I'm talking about today, I happened to come across one of Michael Knowles' videos about someone who is running for Congress. They ran for Congress before, and they lost, but because of redistricting, they're running again and think that maybe they can win. And this is for the 6th District of North Carolina, and it is Clay Aiken. And I just wanted to share his campaign ad because it's so cringy. I just wanted to share it.
For decades, North Carolina was actually the progressive beacon in the South. We had the best roads and the best schools because back then the loudest voices in our government were progressives who actually made sure our state was always moving forward. But then things changed and the progressives lost power, and we started getting backwards-ass policies like the voter suppression bills and the bigoted bathroom bill. Because today, it seems like the loudest voices in North Carolina politics are white nationalists like this guy.
My friends, I encourage you, continue to make your voice heard, because do we love Donald Trump?
And hateful homophobes like this one.
What is the purpose of homosexuality? What does it create?
These folks are taking up all the oxygen in the room, and I gotta tell you, I am sick of it. And I'll tell you something else, as Democrats, we have got to get better about speaking up and using our voices, because those folks ain't quieting down anytime soon. That's why I'm running for Congress. And just think how excited these guys are going to be when we elect the South's first gay congressman.
So, for those of y'all who are listening on audio only, you got to go watch the campaign ad. It is hilarious. And the thing that gets me the most is when he says Democrats have to get better at speaking up and letting their voices be heard. That is all that they do. They are professionals at speaking up and having their voices heard because they are always the loudest in the room. Because they act like little children, so they scream and throw fits when they don't get their way, or they scream and throw fits to try and get their way. So I'm not sure where he's getting this, we don't have voices because we don't speak up. Yeah, well, maybe you didn't, but yes, they do, and that's all they do. And I just thought it was interesting that he was trying to run for Congress again, and I doubt that he'll win. Apparently, there's some Republicans who say, oh, he's such a nice guy, and blah, blah, blah. He's not. I've seen some footage of him. He's kind of a jerk. Don't get me wrong. His album that he released after American Idol, I love it. I like his Christmas album that he released after that. I still like that music, but as far as supporting him for any type of place in government, absolutely not. Okay, so let's get to what we were talking about today. And first, I have so many tabs. This is nuts. I have to find the one that I found first. Okay, so today I want to talk about mass formation psychosis. Okay, now, if you've heard this word before, or this phrase before, this whatever this is you want to call it, you may have heard it when Dr. Malone and Dr. McCullough both have spoken about mass formation psychosis on the Joe Rogan show. And they explained it, and that they believe that it was happening here in the United States right now with COVID. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to put this up on YouTube. I might not be able to, but I'm going to attempt it. Because I think all my strikes are gone now. I've served my time, and it's refreshed. So one strike, it's just a warning. I should be fine. Anyway, so Dr. Malone and Dr. McCullough continue to amplify the message, telling the truth has become a revolutionary act. Telling the truth to everyone you meet will save humanity, so keep doing it. So mass formation psychosis, it's not a new term or a concept. It's been known as mass formation, as formulated by Dr. Mattias Desmet, professor of clinical psychology at Ghent University, and mass delusional psychosis by Dr. Mark McDonald, a psychiatrist and author of United States of Fear, which I'm going to check out that book. I hear it's a really good book, and I'm going to check it out. So the idea has been recently presented as mass formation psychosis by Dr. Malone and Dr. McCullough, which has brought it the most attention. So in dictatorships, obedience comes from basic fear of the dictator, but with totalitarianism, the people are hypnotized into obedience. In psychological terms, this mass hypnosis is known as mass formation, and totalitarianism always starts with a mass formation inside the population. So, a mass formation requires 4 conditions to take root. Number 1, the masses must feel alone and isolated. So, major lockdowns that we've had, and a lot of them still going on. Number 2, their lives must feel pointless and meaningless. Can we get any more pointless and meaningless than all we do is talk about whether you have the Fauci ouchie or not, and that's what makes you human? It's very pointless. Number 3, the masses must experience constant free-floating anxiety. And I will tell you what free-floating anxiety is. I did look this up. Let's see if I can find the other article that I got it from. This one here. So free-floating anxiety, it's called free-floating because there's nothing to connect their anxiety to. There's no focal point. They're unable to identify what's causing, and so no way of dealing with it. And then, of course, which one was I at? This one? And then number 4, they must experience free-floating frustration and aggression. And I think that that may, well, in this article they call it free-floating psychological discontent, but I think that pretty much means the same thing. So people may experience their daily lives as lacking any purpose or meaning. Okay. So these conditions were met in 2020 with the lockdowns and the BLM riots. So there is a video that you can watch. It's a 25-minute video. Dr. Mark McDonald on the High Wire, United States of Fear, How America Fell Victim to Mass Delusional Psychosis. If you wanted to check that out. And then, of course, his book. And, of course, there's lots of different videos with Dr. Malone and Dr. McCullough. So you should probably check that out. Now, I will link these in the description below. So that's just kind of the idea and who has been bringing it to the forefront lately. Now, this article here, it's from WordPress, and it's posted by Thomas Casey. So it says, I came across this information about mass formation and how we are being socially engineered en masse into totalitarianism worldwide. It's from a psychology professor at the University of Ghent in Belgium. Anyway, I took notes of what Professor Mattias Desmet, who also has a master's degree in statistics, observed about the way we are being induced into this sort of mass hypnosis with regards to the pandemic. He calls it the plandemic. There's a plane flying over. It really explains a lot about how things got to where we are now. A lot of this is paraphrased from what Dr. Mattias spoke of, so please go to him as the source. Now, he also has a master's degree in statistics. So, and Gustave Le Bon's book is available on Gutenberg. I guess it's called Crowds. The Crowd, a study of the popular mind. So, if you want to check that out, maybe I'll link that too. So, Le Bon theorized that the new entity, the psychological crowd, which emerges from incorporating the assembled population, not only forms a new body, but also creates a collective unconsciousness. So, we discussed the 4 conditions in order to be able to do this. But continuing on, talking about the free-floating anxiety, it says it's the most painful psychological phenomena to experience and leads to panic attacks. In this state of unfocused anxiety, the mind tries to connect its anxiety to something, an object of anxiety. The next piece of the puzzle is a strategy to deal with this object of anxiety. So when these preconditions are highly present within a population, and then the media provide a narrative which indicates a focal point for this anxiety, while at the same time describing a strategy to deal with this object of anxiety, then all the anxiety connects to this object of anxiety, which I would assume would be COVID. If a large segment of people are willing to follow this strategy to deal with this object of anxiety, no matter the cost, then in the second step, people start a collective and heroic battle with this object of anxiety, and in that way, a new kind of social bond emerges, and with that, a new kind of quote-unquote sense-making or purpose. Suddenly, life is all directed towards battling this object of anxiety. This creates a new sense of connectedness with others in the mass formation. This sudden and radical switch from the negative state of lack of social connection to the opposite, a massive increase in social connection, leads up to a mental intoxication. Similar to hypnosis, people in this hyper-focused state are narrowly focused. In hypnosis, only the hypnotized are focused in this way. The hypnosis expert is not narrowly focused. In mass formation, leaders emerge which are even more narrowly focused than the followers. When people experience this mental intoxication, it no longer matters if the narrative is wrong or even blatantly false. What matters is that it leads up to this mental intoxication. This is why they will continue to go along with the narrative. Case in point, Whoopi Goldberg just recently tested positive. She's vaccinated, she's boosted, she wears probably her N95 mask, she social distances, all of these things. And she said, I did everything right. And I was shocked when I tested positive. But I did everything right. So you would think that that would let her know that getting the Fauci ouchie does you no good. It doesn't matter what you do. Following these rules and regulations didn't help you. So really, what's the point? No more need to follow them, right? No, she doubles down on it and says the only way to get past it is for everyone to get the Fauci ouchie. But why? If it didn't do you any good, what difference is it going to make if everybody gets it? We're still going to get sick. That's the problem. But she cannot compute in her brain that she's been lied to and manipulated, and she's freaking out over nothing, and that once she's realized that she can still get sick, she doesn't say, well, that was stupid. I shouldn't have done all that. It didn't do any good. They're liars. No, she doubles down on it. And that's what they do. The resistance to understanding the narrative is false or wrong is driven by the fear of returning to the state of free-floating anxiety and wanting to continue to experience the mental intoxication. This explains why arguing based on facts will not work. Facts no longer matter to them. Given the facts, they are unable to come to sensible conclusions, even in their own best interests. Mass formation is also similar to mass hypnosis in terms of people's willingness to put up with things normally intolerable. So standard hypnosis is used in place of anesthesia during minor surgeries, and the subjects experience no pain as they are being cut into. Look, I've never been a believer in hypnosis, and I've watched it on TV where they hypnotize people on stage, and you're like, that's not real, that's all fake because it's on TV and they planned it. But seeing what's been going on the last 2 years, and then this being brought up, and reading into it and studying it, I believe you can brainwash people. So really, what's the difference in brainwashing and hypnotizing? You're still altering their brain, and they can't function outside of the parameters of what you've given them. So I don't think I'm so against the fact that you can hypnotize anybody anymore. Okay, in mass formation, people do not get egotistical at all. Rather, to the contrary, mass formation focuses the attention so much on one point that you can take everything away from people, their physical well-being, their material well-being, and they won't even notice its absence. In mass formations, people become radically intolerant of dissident voices. This person threatens to wake the people up, and they get angry when confronted by the initial anxiety and discontent they experience by challenges to the official doctrine. We see that all the time. All the time. You give someone the facts and figures about what's really happening, and they go full-on Karen right in your face, and they lose their minds. They have these major meltdowns. You got a mother shoving her kid in the trunk of her car to keep her from getting sick from him. This is how crazy these people have officially become. The crowd direct all their aggression at dissident voices. At the same time, they are radically tolerant of their leaders who pronounce the mainstream narrative. These people can lie and cheat and do everything they want and will always be forgiven by the crowd. All the lying, dishonesty, and misbehavior is seen by the crowd as doing it for their own safety. So knowing the nature of the control mechanisms mass formation exerts, what to do to wake them up. Okay. I will also put that one in the description. So I saved a few of these on my phone so I could get back to them. But I need to find the one that I had because it broke down some statistics and figures. And I want to look at those again. Oh, no. I'm not sure where it came from. Let me see if I can pull it up. Was it the stigmatizing the unvaxxed? Give me 1 second. I'm trying to find it. So it was Republic Broadcasting. Maybe it was this one. Okay, I don't know, because the one that I wanted to... I'll just have to tell you what it says. So, the one article that I had, it talked about percentages of the population and how... oh, it's this one. Is it this one? Maybe it's this one. Yeah, it's this one. Okay. So it's from this one here. This article. Okay. Sorry about that. I have like 5 or 6 articles on my phone that I saved while I was at work yesterday. And then I have all these up here. So it's hard to keep track of which ones I need to read next. Okay, so this is by Robert W. Malone. He's an MD and an MS. And so this is what he wrote about mass formation psychosis. So he spent time researching and speaking about mass psychosis theory. And most of what he has learned came from Dr. Mattias Desmet, who realized that this form of mass hypnosis of the madness of crowds can account for the strange phenomenon of about 20 to 30% of the population in the Western world becoming entranced with the noble lies and dominant narrative concerning the safety and effectiveness of the genetic Fauci ouchies, and both propagated and enforced by politicians, science bureaucrats, pharmaceutical companies, and legacy media. What one observes with the mass hypnosis is that a large fraction of the population is completely unable to process new scientific data and facts, demonstrating that they have been misled about the effectiveness and adverse impacts of mandatory mask use, lockdowns, and genetic Fauci ouchies that cause people's bodies to make large amounts of biologically active Rona spike proteins. I'm trying to be very cautious of what I say. These hypnotized by the process are unable to recognize the lies and misrepresentations they are being bombarded with on a daily basis and actively attack anyone who has the temerity, is that how you say it? Temerity, to share information with them which contradicts the propaganda that they have come to embrace. And for those whose families and social networks have been torn apart by this process, and who find that close relatives and friends have ghosted them because they question the officially endorsed quote-unquote truth and are actually following the scientific literature, this can be a source of deep anguish, sorrow, and psychological pain. It is with those souls in mind that I included a discussion of the mass formation theory of Dr. Mattias Desmet during a recent talk I gave in Tampa, Florida, to an audience of about 2,000. As I looked out into the audience and spoke, I could see relief on many faces and even tears running from the eyes of stoic men. Unknown to me, someone recorded the speech and appended the vocal track to a series of calming images of natural landscapes, producing a video that has gone viral throughout the world. A link to the video, as well as some notes to clarify, supplement the talk are appended below. Many have told me that they find it very healing. I hope it may help you also. So I will link that into the description as well if y'all want to watch that video. Got a lot to remember to link. So a brief overview of mass formation, which was developed by Dr. Mattias Desmet. It says when he says mass formation, you can think of this as equivalent to crowd formation. One can think of this as crowd psychosis. So the conditions to set up mass formation psychosis include lack of social connectedness and sense making, as well as large amounts of latent anxiety and passive aggression. When people are inundated with a narrative that presents a plausible object of anxiety and strategy for coping with it, the many individuals group together to battle the object with a collective single-mindedness. This allows people to stop focusing on their own problems, avoiding personal mental anguish. Instead, they focus all their thought and energy on this new object. As mass formation progresses, the group becomes increasingly bonded and connected. Their field of attention is narrowed, and they become unable to consider alternative points of view. Leaders of the movement are revered, unable to do no wrong. Left unabated, a society under the spell of mass formation will support a totalitarian governance structure capable of otherwise unthinkable atrocities in order to maintain compliance. And no, mass formation is different from groupthink. There are easy ways to fix groupthink by just bringing in dissenting voices and making sure you give them platforms. It isn't so easy with mass formation. Even when the narrative falls apart, cracks in the strategy clearly aren't solving the issue. The hypnotized crowd can't break free of the narrative. This is what appears to be happening now with the Rona. The solution for those in control of the narrative is to produce bigger and bigger lies to prop up the solution. Those being controlled by mass formation no longer are able to use reason to break free of the group narrative. Of course, the obvious example of mass formation is Germany in the 1930s and 40s. How could the German people, who were highly educated, very liberal in the classic sense, Western-thinking people, how could they go so crazy and do what they did to the Jews? How could this happen? To a civilized people. A leader of a mass formation movement will use the platform to continue to pump the group with new information to focus on. In the case of the pandemic, I like to use the term, quote-unquote, fear porn. Leaders through mainstream media and government channels continuously feed the quote-unquote beast with more messaging that focus and further hypnotize the adherents. Studies suggest that mass formation follows a general distribution. 30% are brainwashed, hypnotized, indoctrinated by the group narrative. 40% in the middle are persuadable and may follow if no worthy alternative is perceived. And 30% fight against the narrative. Those that rebel and fight against the narrative become the enemy of the brainwashed and a primary target of aggression. One of the best ways to counter mass formation is for those against the narrative to continue to speak out against it, which serves to help break the hypnosis of some in the brainwashed group, as well as persuade the persuadable middle to choose reason over mindlessness. Dr. Desmet suggests that for something as big as the pandemic, the only way to break the mass formation psychosis is to give the crowd something bigger to focus on. He believes that totalitarianism may be that bigger issue. Of course, after the pandemic, global totalitarianism may be the biggest issue of our time. So my question is, though, is that if you have them focus on totalitarianism, that's already happening in a lot of like Democrat states. And they're not bothered by them cracking down and taking away their rights and freedoms and forcing them into these, forcing them to not have their rights, okay? They're okay with that. So how do you make them care about our government becoming totalitarian? How do you make them see that as a huge problem if they've been letting it happen for the last 2 years? Unless you just make it way, way bigger than it is. Now, of course, I couldn't not talk about the fact-checking that has been going on since this mass formation psychosis theory has been going around. So, from Reuters, they do a fact-check for us, and it's that fact check, no evidence of pandemic mass formation psychosis, say experts speaking to Reuters. Now, of course, if all of the experts on that side have been lying and manipulating people for the last 2 years, are you really going to believe the expert that says, nope, there's no evidence of this? Because Well, just recently, a study was brought out back early on with the Fauci ouchies. There were some women who were saying that it was changing their menstrual cycles. And on ABC, they did a segment and they said, this is impossible. The Fauci ouchies do not interact with your hormones. This defies science. It can't happen. It won't happen. You're conspiracy theorists. And recently a study has been released showing that the Fauci ouchies are linked to small temporary changes in women's menstrual cycles. So, I'm a little skeptical to believe any experts on that side of the aisle. They lie. So it says, mass formation psychosis is not an academic term recognized in the field of psychology, nor is there evidence of any such phenomenon occurring during the pandemic, multiple experts in crowd psychology have told Reuters. Online searches for the phrase have spiked this month, as seen in worldwide Google Trends data here, after it was used in a popular podcast as a reason why people comply with public health measures. So if you look at it, there was a huge spike, right here, January 2nd, 2022. So, what is this, in the thousands? It hit 100. And you see a lot of it is from Canada, Costa Rica, the U.S., New Zealand, and Finland. Those are the top 5 that were searching it. But we'll talk about Google after I finish this. Dr. Robert Malone, previously fact-checked by Reuters, told the Joe Rogan Experience that mass formation psychosis is a phenomenon that occurred in 1920s and 30s Germany when a highly educated population went barking mad. Actually, he did not say it was the 1920s and 1930s Germany. He said it was the 1930s and 1940s Germany. I don't know if they're being that technical, but it does say that they have fact-checked him before. Fact-checked. Fauci ouchies considered safe for children. Actually, I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. And then the other fact check they did for Dr. Malone was fact check Fauci ouchies are not cytotoxic, suggesting that it kills or damages cells. Well, I guess time will tell. And that is what's happened here, he said, referring to the pandemic. So according to Malone, the condition occurs when a society becomes decoupled from each other and has a free-floating anxiety in a sense that things don't make sense. And then their attention gets focused by a leader or a series of events on one small point, just like hypnosis. He added, they literally become hypnotized and can be led anywhere. They will follow that person. It doesn't matter whether they lie to them or whatever. The data are irrelevant. As of January 3rd, the term has gathered more than 100,000 interactions on public Facebook pages, groups, and verified profiles, according to social media monitoring tool CrowdTangle. Users on Twitter have also shared the term, applying it as if it were a legitimate condition to describe those receiving Fauci ouchies tests and following other health measures. Well, it's funny that they should, call somebody out for using a term that they deem not legitimate, when the left uses terms that are made up all the time. So that's just how it is. But actually, it is a legitimate term. The phrase does not appear in the American Psychological Association Dictionary of Psychology, nor does it appear in the PsychNet database of published research articles. Numerous psychologists have also told Reuters that such a condition is not officially recognized. I've never heard of this concept, John Drury, professor of social psychology and director of research and knowledge exchange at the University of Sussex, wrote an email to Reuters. Okay, see, I don't really care what these experts have to say. It seems to have been made up recently. There are similar sounding concepts like mass psychogenic illness, but the scope of this is relatively narrow compared to what is being proposed here. It's been totally discredited by contemporary work on groups and crowds. He also pointed to a study he co-authored and released in November 2020, analyzing the movement of approximately 15 million Americans during the early stages of the pandemic, finding that one of the single biggest predictors of following social distance guidelines was political partisanship. What is true, of course, is that people do have to make sense of a confusing and complicated world with different accounts coming from different sources. Yeah. Anyway, it says, but telling people who disagree with you that they are deluded and in a state of psychosis is essentially a device to silence them and form of disrespect. You know, but I've noticed when you tell people they're delusional, it doesn't silence them. It makes them yell louder and become even more crazy. They are crazy. They have lost some of they're not sane people. Based on all the data, based on all the data that we have been given and that has been exposed to have been lied about to us by these so-called experts, based on all of that, the fact that some people still follow all high and mighty Dr. Fauci and, bow and worship him and think that he's the end-all be-all of what needs to be done, that makes them crazy and delusional. When you completely ignore facts and figures, that makes you insane. That's what that is. Now, speaking about Google, because there was a time when you would search for mass formation psychosis that there was nothing that popped up on Google. Because Google reset and the screen's results for mass formation psychosis. Okay, so I want to get to where it actually happened. So the Malone-Rogan interview and subsequently the term mass formation psychosis went viral and began trending on social media over the New Year's weekend, prompting search engine giant Google to step in to blunt its spread. It looks like these results are changing quickly, Google states upon searching mass formation psychosis. So instead of it giving you anything, it gives you a note. If this topic is new, it can sometimes take time for results to be added by reliable sources. Turns out the reliable sources Google is now referring for its top results included an obscure YouTube video of a blogger calling for Spotify to shut down Joe Rogan over his interview with Malone. Compare Google's new results to the less politically motivated DuckDuckGo, which shows relevant search results such as Dr. Malone's Substack page and other results clarifying the meaning of mass formation psychosis. That's where I got all of my articles, was through DuckDuckGo. Likewise, Microsoft's Bing also offers more relevant results of mass formation psychosis compared to Google. Malone's Substack page describes in more depth mass formation psychosis, also called crowd psychosis. So, given the similarities between mass formation psychosis and the current state of the world under COVID tyranny, it's unsurprising Google would take a page out of George Orwell's 1984 and become a true ministry of truth by censoring and suppressing concepts themselves in real time in a bid to maintain the establishment narrative. And that's true. The ministry of truth, which was technically the ministry of lies and cover-ups and censorship in 1984. That's why it's ironic to call it the ministry of truth, because they were liars. So when you go to Google, because when I went to DuckDuckGo to do my search, there was just so much stuff came up, and it just kept going and just kept going. I mean, I could have dug in there for hours. So this is kind of what you get. Top stories from Oregon Live. So-called mass formation psychosis does not exist, despite what you might have heard on Joe Rogan. The Independent, Joe Rogan, mass formation psychosis and why people really believe unscientific things. The Independent, no academic credibility. Experts debunk mass psychosis theory floated by doctor on Joe Rogan podcast. And then you have Forbes. What is mass formation psychosis? What is mass formation psychosis? Is it like mass hysteria? A scientist made unfounded COVID-19 mass formation psychosis. So all of it, fact check, no evidence. Wikipedia, America is in a state, well, finally you get one. But then it says, you think you do. But then it says mass formation psychosis is not possible. It's a clickbait term designed to titillate rather than inform. So all of these are, all the top searches on page 1 is all how this isn't possible. Okay? Then you get to page 10 and you're already talking about schizophrenia now. But if you go to DuckDuckGo and you type it, the results that you get here, well, you get Joe Rogan's podcast up there. Then you get from the SWFI Institute about what it is. The second search is from Dr. Malone's Substack page. Then all of these, most of the top ones are not really against it or saying it doesn't exist, but mostly just explaining what it is. So DuckDuckGo clearly has a better search engine, and there was reliable sources to get your information from. Google just suppressed those sources and would prefer that you only see, oh, this isn't possible. Nope, that can't happen. No, this isn't happening. By the time you get through page 2 of your Google search, you kind of give up, because who wants to go to page 3, right? Now, Dr. Malone mentioned that mass formation psychosis is different than groupthink. But I think it is, well, I want to see what this says about groupthink. Because it says that groupthink is just a much easier explanation than mass formation psychosis. So I want to see what exactly said about groupthink. And this is by David Risselata. I have no idea how to say that. Okay, so a new term is gaining popularity, one that is being used to explain the mentality of fear that has taken hold of the public and is driving a false belief that we must surrender our liberties to save ourselves. Interestingly, the term itself was haphazardly thrown out there by the so-called inventor of the mRNA vaccines, Robert Malone, who incidentally was banned from Twitter for criticizing the misuse of the product he allegedly invented. Okay, so now we know that. In fact, a quick Google search, it says there is no such term, right? It says a Google search produces nothing before 2021, and a search on Google Scholar for any academic studies on the term also produces nothing. But that doesn't mean anything. That just means that Google's not allowing you to find the information that you need. Now, it says here, attempting to study brainwashing effects by looking up the term mass formation psychosis will do nothing but bring up cocky editorials by those seeking to discredit Malone and dissuade people from studying the very real effects of something called the groupthink mentality. So what is groupthink? While seemingly self-explanatory, groupthink is one of the most influential theories in the behavioral sciences that seeks to answer why tightly knit groups make the decisions they do and behave in the manner they behave. According to the journal Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes, groupthink leads to extreme consensus-seeking and decision-making processes that are considered undesirable. Illusions of invulnerability, collective rationalization, stereotypes of outgroups, self-censorship, mind guards, and the belief in the inherent morality of the group. That was from Turner and Pratkines in 1998. Are some of the characteristics that affect group attitudes. Another, albeit more biased article entitled Group Level Resistance to the Health Mandates During the Pandemic, a Groupthink Approach, lists social isolation, stress, cohesion, and identity, and illusions of morality as key characteristics to groupthink behavior. While this article is extremely biased in its left-wing rationalization and support for the COVID agenda, it does explain groupthink in its simplest terms. In fact, this article focuses exclusively on those groups who oppose restrictive measures and applies the groupthink mentality to them. Anyone who takes the time to read this article will immediately see the inherent bias and how the concepts of groupthink apply more to those supporting COVID interventions than anything else. So groupthink can be best described by saying there is a desire to conform to a group consensus during times of stress and isolation, and this desire to conform dramatically affects individual decision-making processes. Okay, well, let's open this up and let's see what this says about it. Oh, no, I ain't gonna read all that. Nope. Okay. Our need to belong to a social group is perhaps one of the most taken advantage of and understood aspects of human susceptibility that dates back decades. B.F. Skinner states in Beyond Freedom and Dignity that the fear of disapproval is one of the most powerful motivators for producing desirable behavioral change. Looking at the characteristics of groupthink like self-censorship and collective rationalization, it is easy to see that the desire to find belonging is a driving factor. Members fear going against the popular consensus of the group because they do not want to be shunned, ridiculed, or isolated. Group opinions can be reinforced by the approval of those they may see as authority figures. In Science and Human Behavior, Skinner states that the attention people receive for their actions can reinforce their behavior. Reinforcement with smiles and praise is strengthened by such attention and used to establish and shape the behavior of others. If groupthink is influenced by characteristics such as social isolation, stress, the fear of social disapproval, and higher morality, could desirable attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors be created to push an agenda? Saul Alinsky said in Rules for Radicals, all that is needed to gain acceptance of change is the fear of the unknown, and that people will accept a new path if the old system is proven to be hopeless. Fear was the primary tool used to push the narrative. According to an article entitled COVID-19, Rethinking the Lockdown Groupthink, what Malone referred to as a mass formation psychosis occurred because there was a media appeal to mass hysteria. COVID was presented as a common threat, and accepting or adopting the recommended interventions were reinforcing because it was approved by authorities on all levels and united people in the belief that they were acting for the better of everyone. There was a driving belief in what the media was pushing, and the morality behind adopting the interventions was unquestionable. Those who refused to go along, much like we are seeing today, are labeled as traitors or uncaring about society. This, of course, also acts as a reinforcer for those sitting on the sidelines and afraid of being socially shunned. It doesn't require a great deal of research to know that fear is the primary weapon of the tyrant. In the book Rape of the Mind, Just Mierlo, after experiencing firsthand the techniques used by the Nazis to interrogate and break down political prisoners, states that a person's will to resist can be easily broken through psychological torture, belittlement, and confusion. These interventions have been driven by little more than belittlement and confusion. The constant bombardment of propaganda meant to frighten us into unquestioning compliance is certainly a form of mental torture. This coincides with something found in a book called Brainwashing, a synthesis of the Russian textbook of psychopolitics. Allegedly written by Stalin's henchman, Lavrenti Beria, the book states that one of the first and most important steps in destabilizing a nation is producing as much chaos and scientific turmoil possible. Well, this has certainly been achieved by what we're going through. Under the groupthink model, conformity is achieved through the abandonment of reason, the deterioration of judgment and rationality, and seeking the approval of those who promise to alleviate their anxieties. Mierlo states in Rape of the Mind that a constant state of fear is necessary to induce people into a state of mind where they willingly abandon their own sense of reason and their ability to think for themselves. Much of this has to do with the fact that most people have an inherent trust in media and government. According to Mierlo, people trust the government because they have a hard time imagining that their leaders would act against their best interest. Or perhaps they simply find comfort in abiding by the rules because they feel if they comply, they will largely be left alone. I promise you, you won't. It will eventually come for you. The idea that society can come under the influence of mass hypnosis is certainly not without merit. Most of this writer's efforts focus on the psychology of persuasion and compliance. To study it under the term mass formation psychosis, however, will get you nowhere. It was a term made up on the spot to describe something that is very real, but a lot simpler to explain. People have a need to belong. We don't like feeling isolated or alone. This fact by itself drives most people into a state of conformity. When people are confused and afraid, they are easily influenced. This is particularly true when they fall under the label persuasion scholars call low elaboration likelihood. Finally, the belief that their actions are driven by a higher morality can also override individual thought processes and produce a group conformity. Miller stated that people experience a great deal of emotional relief when their actions are taken for what is perceived to be the greater good. These factors are easily explainable by studying groupthink. While it is possible a term like mass formation psychosis may catch on, a Google Scholar search for groupthink produced several articles in relation to the pandemic, while mass formation psychosis produces nothing. As the propaganda picks up once again for the third year, it is imperative that people understand what the powers that be known about our behavior, individually and in groups. So I guess these are some of the articles. Group level resistance to health mandates during the pandemic, a groupthink approach. Rethinking the lockdown groupthink, 25 years of groupthink theory and research, lessons from the evaluation of a theory. That might be interesting. Yeah. Maybe I'll do an article on that to kind of explain better the groupthink thing. Now, there were other articles that I had brought up. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to the rest of them. Oh, that's not it. I will link them anyway. All of the ones that I have. So that way, if you want to, you can. You can read them. I wonder if I have time to do this last one that I really wanted to do. 23 minutes. Yeah, I think I can do this one. I think I can do this last one because I really wanted to get this one in there. So, mass formation, also known as mob or crowd psychology, is the study of how individual behavior is influenced by a large group of people. This branch of social psychology has been studied by Sigmund Freud, Floyd Allport, Gustave Le Bon, and many others. It is suggested by Gustave Le Bon that the masses go through three main stages as part of what's considered to be a mass hypnosis. Submergence, a phase characterized by losing individual identity, which is similar to the concept of de-individuation. Is that how you say that? Individuation? I think they wrote that wrong. That was introduced by Festinger and his colleagues in 1952. This theory explains that being in a crowd lessens personal identity, guilt, self-evaluation, empathy, and other individual morality-related behaviors. This theory was then improved by Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment. They said that's very creepy. Then you have contagion, a phase characterized by having individuals' ideas and emotions greatly influenced by the dynamics of their surrounding masses. And suggestion, the phase where the group have developed a shared unconscious which affect their decisions and feelings. Freud also suggests that being in a crowd reveals the unconscious, given that the moral principle is displaced by the more powerful masses or more influential group leader. The best and worst example is how many Germans blindly followed Hitler's immoral and inhumane orders during the Holocaust and actually believed it was for the greater good. Recently, a Belgian professor of clinical psychology at Ghent University, which is Dr. Mattias Desmet, expressed concerns about some of the data he has been studying that might be causing the lack of empathy and segregation that we've been seeing in the Western world recently because of the pandemic. Dr. Mattias has identified 4 psychological conditions that may have resulted in crowd madness or mass formation. So, once again, lack of social bond and isolation, experiencing life as meaningless or senseless, free-floating anxiety, and free-floating frustration and aggression. So we know what that is. I'm trying not to just reread everything. Well, that's pretty much it. Let me just reiterate exactly what it is. But it said that it got all this from Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment. I'm curious as to what that is. Oh. I just took a screenshot. I didn't mean to do that. Well, nothing happened. I don't remember which one I was on. Here. Copy. Paste. So this was in 1971. A psychologist and his colleagues set out to create an experiment that looked at the impact of becoming a prisoner or prison guard, known as the Stanford Prison Experiment. The study went on to become one of the best known and controversial in psychology's history. Oh, I remember. I think they reversed the roles of, not reversed the roles, but they had people play prison guards and people play prisoners. And just to see what they did as a prison guard to the people playing prisoners, it was really, well, they were very aggressive. And you have to ask yourself, why did they go straight to that type of behavior? It's very strange. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here for today. I think I've covered quite a bit of this and gave you some stuff to look into yourself and to think about. You're going to have plenty of articles to look at and just do your own research for it, because you should always do that. But this is just something that I wanted to share because I think it's important. And whether or not that this is a legitimate term, whether or not it's more considered groupthink than it is mass formation psychosis, the name of what it is does not matter. But the description of what has to happen to have people behave in such a way as we do see people behaving after certain things have happened, it makes a lot of sense. You know, you need these conditions to do it. Well, these conditions happen and you have people acting exactly like they say people would act. So, is it psychosis? Is it groupthink? Who knows? Does it really matter what we call it, other than calling out the fact that we see it happening and something needs to be done? Because these people may not realize it, but they're being manipulated and lied to and tortured, in their mind by all the fear that is bombarded at them from the legacy media and their government leaders. And it's going to end up hurting people. And it's already has, but it's going to be much, much worse. And the whole point of doing things like this is to get the truth out there and wake people up, so they don't have to be abused by their government any longer. So, I hope you had a good time today. Hope you learned something new. I will be back here on Monday with another episode. And don't forget to check in next week. It will either be uploaded Wednesday or Thursday next week. I haven't decided on the one about the founding of the United States and its ties to Bible principles and Christianity. So be on the lookout for that. Don't forget, you can go to Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe to my channel, leave a comment or a review, and then check me out on YouTube. Go watch my videos, like and share them around. You can leave a comment. I'll get back to you on that. But the best thing you can do for me is to hit the subscribe button. And then the best thing you can do for yourself is hit the notification bell so you know when I upload new videos. And hopefully this one doesn't get taken down, but we shall see. Anyway, I hope you have a good rest of your day, and God bless.